This Week in History with Mike and Will. I am Mike.
And I'm Will.
And it's This Week in History. Back again.
Back after, 2 months?
I don't know.
No, it was just last week. It's only been a week. We just look a lot different.
If you missed us, well, there's plenty of things to look up at our previous episodes.
Yep. And we missed you guys.
And history also never stops, really.
No. Now I got more events to write about.
If you're just joining us, what we do is every week Will looks up a historical event that happened on this week, sometime in history, and he's got 1 hour to explain that event to me. All right, and then we pick another one next week.
Yep. Now this week, obviously, this is from what was planned to be a few weeks ago.
Sure.
And then we got busy. We were doing local theater stuff, and we were having a good time. So I'm still going to do the event because otherwise people go, what happened to that episode where you were going to talk about... What's the subject?
Elenor of Aquitaine.
Yeah, that's right. Elenor of Aquitaine, who we've actually mentioned 6 times on this show, so I figured she gets her own.
Okay, good.
She gets her own event.
All right. I think it's
rules. We already went over the rules.
We haven't done this in a while.
Haven't done it in a while. We're rusty. It's okay.
All right. So he's got 1 hour to explain to me the life and times of Elenor of Aquitaine.
Huzzah! Ready?
Set.
Go. All right. Elenor of Aquitaine. She is called of Aquitaine because she is from Aquitaine, which is a region in France. Now, Aquitaine back then, because she was born in 1122, so the Aquitaine of then is very different than the Aquitaine of now. Aquitaine now is a province of France.
Still exists.
But it's kind of like an American county. It's a region. It's not huge. But back then, the Aquitaine was 1/3 of modern day France.
Oh.
So it was huge. And it's like the west and south portions of France. So it's very rich, very fertile.
I assumed it was just the big
it's
the fertile lands.
Yes, it's basically the nicest part of France.
Okay.
And her dad owns it. He also expanded it to own different regions of France.
Now, this time, what is France as far as is it kingdom with?
Yep. France, so I actually wanted to talk about that. So right now, France is what's called a feudal monarchy. The feudal system, we've talked about it a bunch.
Sure.
And that basically started when, after the Roman Empire fell, the empire became several kingdoms. And the kings would need people to run the land for them because they didn't have modern forms of communication.
Serfs.
Kind of. And they didn't have, that's part of it. That's the lowest rung of feudal society.
I know the lowest rung.
You know the lowest rung. That's the key. But the idea is that I can't run all of this land by myself because I can't be in 15 places at once. So I need people who are loyal to me. And originally that was like you had a personal relationship with these people. They were your friends. They were your family. But eventually as lands got bigger and more spread out.
You can only know so many people.
Correct.
Yeah.
So you just have these people swear an oath.
That'll do.
I promise I'll do this thing. And in return for that, they owe you military service. So if you have to go to war with either one of your vassals, as they were called, one of the people who works for you, or a neighboring kingdom, you just say, hey, everybody who swore this oath, you join me, or you can pay me money so I can hire professional soldiers.
Oh.
And this is at a time where lords they're warriors. They're all warriors. They have to fight to control their lands, and that usually means taking a sword or an axe and hitting somebody else in the face. There's not a really sturdy legal system. Half of it ends up being trial by combat, or you guys get your 10 guys and we'll just beat each other up, and whoever wins.
But is that still the norm thing?
To just beat people up?
Well, it's not total anarchy and chaos. There's still some sort of code of ethics.
There's kind of a code.
Okay.
So this concept of chivalry was eventually introduced really to help control the more violent urges of the warrior class, which was basically everybody with money. Because what you have is, at the very bottom, you have the serfs. You have the serfs, the peasants, the villeins, whatever country you're in, it's the same thing. Right. They work the land, which is basically it's like a half an acre of land, maybe an acre of land. It's not a huge amount. And then they have their house on it, and then they work the land. And then they give a portion of that to the Lord, and then another portion of that, a tithe, to the church. And then whatever's left, they get to keep and eat. It's usually not enough to sell, so it's just subsistence farming, and that's how you spend your life.
Huh.
Now, misconception is that peasants were sickly and looked like garbage. But because of the way the food was made, there wasn't a lot of sugar, and they were working all the time. They're actually quite healthy. They might have fleas and other problems like that, which is obviously very uncomfortable. But like they usually had pretty good teeth. They didn't get fat because you couldn't.
No time.
They were usually fairly strong and healthy. But if disease came through, that wiped out the children. So you had like 15 kids, and maybe 5 of them reached adulthood. It was really rough life. But the child mortality rate didn't change based on class, which is different.
Yeah.
Because there was no medicine. Like if you were rich and you got sick, they're like, well, we'll stab you and bleed out some blood, the bad blood, and then you'll feel better. Well, you just die faster.
They stab people do that?
They stuck them in like the vein and they'd let blood just pour out. That was bloodletting. Yeah. Or they'd use leeches. That was a thing. Yeah. That's how they killed George Washington. They thought he had bad blood, so they let it basically leak out of him.
I heard that's how they killed Robin Hood too.
That's how they kill a lot of people. Just stick them with pokey things and they die.
Well, I mean, medically, stick them with pokey.
Yeah. It's different. It's not it's the same result as going to war, but it's a medical thing. Right. It's like, oh, good, you just killed your friend. So you have them. Then you have the freemen. Now, serfs were tied to the land. They couldn't move. Right? You're stuck there.
Yeah.
Your dad was there. You're there. No. That's life. Freemen could move from place to place to place and work the field. That was where that was a nice sweet spot. If you didn't like this area, you could leave. You didn't have a ton of money, but you could move around. Then you have kind of this weird mercantile class. Cities at the time would have what's called a charter, which we have nowadays. Still, we have town charters and things like that. But a city meant they weren't owned by lords or nobles. They had their own rules and rights and privileges. They had people just kind of living there. They weren't tied to the land. They could sell and trade goods. And they really only owed their allegiance to the crown. And that was weird. They were run by like a town council usually, not a lord. And they might have a lord living on like the same land. And the lord might be able to sometimes get tax from them, but that was all part of the charter. Okay. So lord couldn't go in and be like, you owe me all this. They're like, nope, town charter, totally different. And there were rules like if a serf was able to escape to a city for like 6 months or a year, then they became a freeman.
Oh.
So you could get, that was like the only way you could get out. And obviously cities had to kind of wage like, well, they just had a mass exodus of people. If we let them all live in here, then the lords are all going to get mad at us, and the king's going to get mad because nobody's farming, we're starving. Here, you can have some of the peasants back. So it was a very complex situation.
This sounds like a problem we still have today.
Yeah, which is, well, it gets worse.
Okay, good.
So then there's the knight class. Now, knights were all warriors. That was a mandatory thing. You had to have enough land, and bear in mind, all of the land that we've talked about before this is subletted from the knights. So if you're peasants, now all the, let's say 10 peasants are kind of underneath one knight. Okay. And now there might be different little strata under the knight. Like there might be like a burger or whatever, depending on not a hamburger, but with an H in it, Burgher. Burgers are usually town folk, but they might run like an area. Okay. And then those guys pay up under the knights. Now the knights are all warriors. They have to have enough land and collect enough money to pay for arms and armor, weapons and armor, and a horse. And they're expected to serve as military experts. And that's all they have to do. That's it. They collect enough taxes to kick it up to the lord above them, who then collects enough taxes to kick it up to the king above him.
All a big pyramid scheme.
It's a massive pyramid scheme, but with a huge level of violence involved. Because the knights all owed their allegiance directly to the lord, not necessarily to the king. But then the king is also his own landowner, so he has crown lands. Like they're owned by the crown directly. So instead of him having, lords and then knights, he just has knights. So he's typically got the most land directly owned by him, and then he's got a bunch of warriors working under him. So him versus one lord, theoretically, he should always have way more guys and be able to do whatever he wants. The whole of feudalism is based on who can beat the crap out of the other person. That's really what it boils down to. So it was very important for kings to have a good relationship with their nobles, because the nobles can just say no. And if you don't have more guys than them or more clout, which is usually like a physical clout, like you need to be able to go in and take their stuff, then they don't have to listen to you.
So are the nobility then and kings and such like that this time, are they warriors themselves, or are they just rich people who were born into it who can hire warriors?
A bit of a mix. So obviously if you were a really good warrior and a really good you could pick who handled what jobs, or you were good with money, or you're good with all these other things. That's really the goal, is to be good at all the things. If you're a noble who's just good at hitting people, then you are, and knights are nobles as well. They can become lords. They can work their way up. Freemen, not so much. That's harder. Anything below a knight is very hard to move up. You can get knighted by another knight. So if you're a peasant, they can knight you. That's a legitimate thing. And you can get ennobled by the king. The king can make those choices, but super duper rare, because you're never given the opportunity to climb up. I wonder if we have something similar to that today, where if you're extremely poor, it's very, very hard to get out of that unless somebody above you who's born into wealth helps out.
Yeah.
And if it's the same thing.
Oh.
So
It's the same thing.
It's the same thing. So nobles, a lot of the times, they were warriors. They'd wear the armor, they'd ride to battle, they'd fight. But obviously, as you get older, you can't fight as well.
Yeah. And also, at some point, what's the point of being a noble if you can't relax?
Yes. So it's a bit of a mix. Some of the lords, you could just pay military service dues, basically. Like, all right, I'm worth this much money. There. Hire some guys. Or you just kick grab all your knights and go, okay, go fight for the king. I'm not coming.
Okay.
You might ride along, but you're probably not getting stuck in. And then the more powerful you become, the bigger the risk of losing you is. So like a king was usually not expected to go into battle after a certain point.
Sure.
Because if the king dies, the war's over.
Yeah, that's how chess works.
It's like chess, yes. And that's the whole basis of chess. That's a medieval construct. It uses older games, but the whole point is
Sure.
the king is kind of an important piece in what it can do, but it's not the most effective piece.
The king's a thing, baby.
And if the king's moving around, you can do whatever. It's using all the other pieces to protect the king and take the other king out. And once you take the king out, you win. So that's feudalism. And it's all based on who has the most money and who has the most land, and therefore who controls the most people, which is it's a precursor to capitalism.
Yeah, I was going to say, luckily we've evolved past that.
We've moved past it. But no, it's seriously the billionaire class runs everything, and if you're not a billionaire, then you might be a millionaire, but the billionaire's still really in charge.
Yeah, but
then if you're a peasant, you can be like, yeah, go millionaires, but you're never, ever, ever gonna be one.
I don't know,
because we don't unless you have inherited wealth.
We've got better bootstraps now.
Yeah, we can pull up by the bootstraps. That's right. Back then, their boots weren't that great. That's probably why they all stayed poor.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have the same income disparity now, if not worse, than the Middle Ages. Because we also have a vast difference in comfort. Oh. Back then, a king would still just live in a stone house. It's the same as anybody else's stone house, but maybe it's got some nice wool trappings on the side. It's not really any better. You don't have a plumbing. You still sit on a bench to poop. It's not that crazy of a difference. Nowadays, our poorest people usually live better than like medieval lords. Oh. Because you can just
electricity,
go and
if nothing else.
Throw food in a microwave and you have food.
Yeah.
Obviously homelessness is very different, but if you have like a basic income kind of a thing, your life is more comfortable, and that's actually used as a defense for when people are poor and complain. They're like, "Well, my life is hard." Yeah, but you live better than a medieval king. It's like, yeah, but that's not saying much because they had fleets.
They're all dead now,
and they're all dead. All right, so that's the background we're playing. It's the sandbox, right? Well, here's what's different in France at this time. Like I said, the kings usually have the biggest chunk of land. Not in France. The Aquitaine is the largest chunk of France.
Yes.
So whoever controls it controls the richest, nicest part of land. And the king did not control that by himself. He had to have it, somebody swore allegiance to him. He had to have a vassal control it. But again, if they're strong enough, they just go, and they don't have to listen to the king. The king of France at this time was Louis VI, also known as Louis the Fat.
Louis!
He basically spent a lot of his reign with gout and dysentery. So he's a winner. And the ruler of the Aquitaine was William X, and his wife, Elenor. She was from Châtellerault. Châtellerault? It's a very... I've never seen the word before. Châtellerault. So we'll just call her Elenor. Now, they had a daughter born in 1122. She was called Alianor. So, Eleanor, it was eventually what it became. And Alianor is Latin, and it means the other Elenor. So she was basically like a teeny tiny carbon copy of Mom.
Yeah.
That's one version of how they think that the name was come about. Also, there was an Elenor who was a very famous Norman princess. Basically, she was a powerful woman in the Norman society. What's going on here, though, is the Aquitaine not only is the biggest, wealthiest chunk of land, it also has special rules. Because the Aquitaine was created when the old kingdom run by the Visigoths, who were the people who like overthrew the Roman Empire, they had their own rules, and they didn't say that a daughter couldn't inherit land. And they're the only duchy that has this rule. They said
No one says a dog can't play basketball.
And they said women can inherit, women can run the land, women can disinherit people within their family. They don't need a husband. They can do basically whatever they want. So
tear down the patriarchy.
Pretty much, and that was weird, because everywhere else it was like no, eldest son, eldest male relative. That was what it wound up being. So they have a rule of they have preferred primogeniture. Primogeniture is like eldest child gets it, and they prefer that the eldest male gets it, but the eldest female is allowed. Now, a reason why eldest male gets it is a thing is because everywhere else didn't believe the rules applied to them. So they would literally go in and try to kidnap the women that were the heir and just marry them and force them into marriage. And that was considered perfectly acceptable behavior. So if you find out that this person running this land owns it and she's single and you want it, you go in and you just grab her and then you marry her, and now you own all the land. And that's totally socially acceptable. It's religiously acceptable. It's totally fine, which is messed up.
Yeah.
So if you're a woman in this situation, you need to find a very strong protector to secure your rights.
Sure.
Now, the Aquitaine, being very wealthy, being kind of in the south, it's a little more libertine in its lifestyle. It's a little more relaxed. People have more fun because they're not like, the winter's the worst and we all died. It's a little more chill. Now, Elenor is raised by her father to be educated. She learns multiple languages. She speaks Poitevin, which is the local dialect of French. She also speaks and can read Latin. She's taught chess, checkers. She's taught hawking and falconry and hunting, which are considered manly enterprises. Her older brother predeceased her when he was 4, so her younger brother predeceased her when he was like 4. So she's gonna get the land. She's the eldest child left, and her parents had 3 kids: her little brother, and her little sister, and that's it. Which is a pretty small family for the time. Right. And since her brother died, and her mother died like the same year, possibly same illness, which is sad. She's groomed from then on at the age of 8. You're gonna run this show. Because Dad's like, I'm not having more kids. And also, Dad was known as William the Saint, so he seems like he's a pretty all right guy. Sure. He had beefs with, like, the Pope, and it caused problems. So the Pope doesn't like the whole family. Yeah. That's great. And that'll in no way impact little Eleanor's life. He said lying. Spoiler. So Elenor is raised basically with this amazing education and all the support you could get. And her father just doted on her. Just loved his little girl. Well, unfortunately, Mom's dead in 1130. Dad dies 7 years later. Elenor is, since she was born roughly in 1122, we're not sure. She's either 13 to 15 is the guess, which is...
It's a rough time for girls.
It's a rough time for girls. That's a really rough time for a lot of people, but girls especially. Sure. And then she's in this very unique position of, I get to own all this land. And some big mean person's probably going to come and try to steal me. Yeah. And her father had rivals, so it wasn't like
probably going to be one of them.
Well, while Dad was traveling at the end of his life, he knew he was sick. He wanted to go on a pilgrimage, which was a really common thing at the time. And he got to almost where he was going, and then was like, I'm not going to make it.
Oh, no.
I have to change my will. I want Elenor to get everything. Every single thing I own. She gets it. Not my brothers, not my cousins, nobody else. Elenor is the sole inheritor of my property because I adore her. I want my friend, King Louis, to protect her until and try to secure her a good marriage. And that way, she'll be safe. And nobody tell anybody I'm dead until the king sees this letter. So it's kind of like a spy mission.
Ooh.
He tells his guys to do this. So his knights have to ride across the Pyrenees, which is the mountain range in the south of France, and then gallop basically to get to the king. They stop in to tell Elenor, because that's her right to know.
Sure, yeah.
And to make sure
Don't
that
tell anyone except Elenor.
Yep. And they're like, okay, so just so you know, your father passed. We're going to make sure you're put in a safe place where somebody super duper loyal to him, and you'll be protected. And she's like, cool. So she goes to this safe place where she's surrounded by loyal men who are going to protect her because they loved her father. They go to tell the king, and the king's like, he's dying of dysentery already.
The king is?
This king, Louis the Fat. And he's like, oh no, my friend, I grieve for you. And the second those guys leave, he goes, ha 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 ha, she's going to marry my son.
Oh.
He immediately ignores the dying wish of this guy.
Maybe interpret it as, yeah,
and
I
then
got a nice guy.
Turns around, tells his son, I want you to take 500 knights and go meet her. You're getting married.
Okay.
So he sends his son with these knights to go and marry Elenor. So he secured a match, but now
He didn't say.
But now he's securing his legacy. So now he goes from owning like the northern chunk of France to the northern chunk of France, and then the biggest, nicest part of France. Yeah. And then his grandkids will end up owning it permanently. So he's tying it permanently to his family.
Nice.
Smart.
Good thinking there.
Evil.
Fatty.
Pretty evil. And then he promptly dysenteries himself to death.
Oops.
Because it couldn't happen to a nicer guy, because it was a schemy, nasty thing to do. So he dies while his son goes to get married. His son gets married, and he is also a Louis. So now he's Louis the Seventh. Louis marries Elenor. They become the Duke and Duchess of Aquitaine. The rules are that her kids will inherit, and then but the kingship doesn't get to say we own the Aquitaine. She doesn't want it to become part of their family yet. Oh. So one generation down, they still are independent. If something else weird happens, they still get it. And then a generation later, then it's part of the kingdom.
Oh, sure. After I'm gone.
After
do whatever I
I'm
want.
gone. Well, everything seems to be hunky-dory, and then Louis is like, he's like, I'm the Duke now. Yay, cool. And then the guy shows up after he's been made the Duke, and he's like, by the way, your dad died last week, because it takes forever to get news anywhere. Because, what had happened was on 25th of July, 1137, so literally her father is dead for 3 months, and she's married off. And then on August 1st of 1137, King Louis dies.
Ooh.
And then on August 8th, Louis VII is made, they tell him he's going to be king. And then he's crowned, she's crowned queen. Yay, happy celebration time. Now, because Elenor is lively and brilliant and a bit sassy.
And 15?
Well, she's 15.
Okay.
She's 15.
Go on.
She might be 13. But because she has this kind of an attitude of, she's a strong, independent woman. The Northern French don't like her at all.
Don't care for that.
She has an opinion. They don't like that. She's smart. They don't like that. Now, she's also skilled at everything that was considered a woman's household thing she should be able to be good at. She's a great seamstress. She's a weaver. She knows how to run a household, which is an interesting thing because usually the women were in charge of all the finances.
Yeah.
So she's good at all the things. And they don't like that. One of her biggest detractors was Bernard of Clairvaux, who became a saint. Literally Saint Bernard. I don't know if the dog is named after him, but he comes off as kind of an uptight jerk because he had a problem with how she dressed. He had a problem with her having opinions. Classic church guy stuff. While she is kind of figuring out her place in the court, she brings some of her friends and family. She ensures that her sister is brought with her so that she gets a place in court and is protected. It's very important to her that her family's taken care of. Louis worshipped the ground she walked on. Absolutely worshipped her. He changed the palace so that it reflected like where she came from, tried to do everything he could to make her comfortable.
Did she like
happy.
him?
She seems to have tolerated him. She liked him in the beginning. We're going to find out what happens. Her sister fell in love with a guy named Raoul. Raoul, and her name is Petronilla. Petronilla and Raoul are madly in love. Problem is, Raoul's married.
Oh.
Raoul's wife is the sister of another count. These two were both counts.
Okay.
And his name is Theobald. And Theobald has an issue with the king. Now, it's very complicated. This is very soap opera-y, so we're going to have to try to follow this.
Okay.
Louis wanted to pick the bishop of a place called Bourges. Okay? Bourges. Bourges. The Pope had a different guy in mind. The Pope's guy was actually way more qualified. But Louis was like, this guy's my friend. So he said, I don't care what the Pope says. This guy's going to be the new bishop. He bars entrance to the town to this other dude. And that dude has to go and seek refuge or he'll get maybe murdered. And the guy he seeks refuge with is Theobald.
Huh.
And Theobald is super loyal to the Pope. He didn't like Eleanor's dad because of his rivalry with the Pope. And this is a whole continuation of that problem. Okay.
So we're getting the protagonist and antagonist teamed up.
We're getting the teams. Yep, it's all working together. Now, Elenor just wants her sister to be happy. So she's like, she should be allowed to be married to Raoul. Raoul loves her. She loves Raoul. Happy. Also, Raoul is more loyal to the king than his current wife, who was married to Theobald.
Oh, yeah.
Or sister of Theobald.
Yeah, sister.
So
everyone could be happy except for her.
Yes. Okay. So she's like, so let her be happy. It'll be great. And, Theobald's a jerk. We don't care what he thinks. It literally causes a war. Because Theobald doesn't give his permission for the marriage to end. Turns
out he does care.
So, Theobald is like, my sister is married to this guy. I don't give permission to them to be separated. I'm not okay with that. It's going to mess with the inheritance. Also, he's a lying, cheating, thieving jerk. Sure. Causes a rift. Louis goes to war with him. Now it's the king going to war with a count. A count does not own nearly as much land as, say, a duke. He's lower on the totem pole.
Or as many soldiers, I bet.
He does not have nearly as many soldiers. They go to war, and Louis burns one of the villages to the ground. Louis is in charge personally of this attack. There were 1,000 people hiding in the church.
Oh.
The church burns to the ground.
Oh, no.
Louis is responsible for killing 1,000 Christians that are his subjects.
That's a big whoopsie-daisy.
He doesn't feel so good about that.
Well,
and immediately says,
he doesn't feel good about it.
Yeah, at least he doesn't feel great. He says, let's make peace. That was icky. I don't like it.
Yeah, sorry.
They have peace, but the condition is that Raoul and Petronilla have to split, and Raoul has to go back to his wife. And Raoul refuses. So everything starts back up again.
It would be embarrassing.
And Elenor wants to solve this.
Okay.
So, because the king kind of loses his taste for the fighting, he goes off and decides, I'm going to build a church. He goes to build this church, which is a big thing. You get credit. Look at me making this building. God loves me more.
Sure.
While they're there, Bernard of Clairvaux, the saint, eventually, he's there, and Elenor says, hey, let's make a deal. And she asks him, and he doesn't like her, remember, because she's...
Saint Bernard doesn't like her?
Saint Bernard does not like her. So this is June of 1144, so she's now 20.
Okay.
The thing was that the Pope, being friends with Theobald and not liking anything Louis doing, excommunicated Raoul and Petronilla.
Oh, no.
That was just a thing the Pope did. He excommunicates a lot of people.
I was going to say, I feel I've heard this threat before, and it doesn't really...
He puts an interdiction on a town. He threatens to excommunicate Louis. It's a whole thing. Louis is like...
Maybe it meant to them something at the time, but I don't know.
So Elenor says, hey, how about this? Bernard, you talk to the Pope, because you're friends, and you ask him to lift the excommunication order on my sister and her lover, and let them get hitched and be happy, and I'll talk to Louis, and he'll let the Pope's choice of bishop become the bishop. The whole thing that the whole fight started over, and we'll fix it. And he says, how dare you interfere in politics? You're a woman. And so
he can still take the idea,
this is a story, so I feel like this is colored. And then she apparently cries and says, I'm just upset because I haven't had any children yet. Oh. And so Bernard, being totally a good guy, is like, okay, you tell Louis to stop fighting with the Pope, and I'll ask God to give you a child.
Oh, I didn't know we had a...
tit for tat.
Sure. That seems fair.
And she says, that sounds great. And then a month later, she's pregnant.
Oh, yeah.
Yay. And then 9 months after that, she has a daughter. Now, having a daughter for the King of France means nothing to him.
Yeah.
He does not want a daughter because whoever marries her gets all her land. That's the rule. So he'd have to pass on his family name and his line to some other guy. No king wants that. It's fine to have a daughter to use as like a sort of a diplomatic wedding. If I've got 6 sons and a daughter, I want that daughter to marry a powerful guy so that we're friends now. We're tied by family. But if I only have daughters, I don't want them to marry any rival, and really anybody, because the family dies. The name dies. That's a big thing for most of these kings. They got to have sons because it's stupid that way.
Yeah.
Not everybody's as cool as the Aquitaine. So, yay, she has a daughter. Good for her.
Yeah.
And I really just hate the way it's painted as like, oh, she's bad for wanting to broker peace. And she got blamed for everything. She gets blamed for the war, which was started not just because like she wanted her sister to be happy, marry this guy, but Theobald was a Pope dude and hated Louis because Louis didn't like the Pope much, and that was all part of their who gets to be the bishop fight. But Elenor gets blamed because woman with an opinion.
Yeah.
That's really what it is.
Yeah. She did have an opinion.
She had an opinion. So she has her daughter, Marie, and then by Christmas of 1145, Louis is feeling really bad about massacring 1,000 people.
Still, he can't get over that?
Get over that.
Right.
So he says, you know what, we'll make it better. I'm going to go on crusade and massacre different people.
Yeah, there we go. That'll cleanse my soul.
That'll make it so much better. Now, we talked about the First Crusade. That was in 1099. It secured the Holy Land for the Christians who never owned it in the first place, and they killed a lot of people to get there. A lot of people.
For God.
And then they expanded that into multiple kingdoms. There's the kingdom of Jerusalem, like the county of Tripoli, Edessa, a whole bunch of land. It's not doing that well because it's basically an enclave of Europeans living in the Middle East going, hi, we live here now, and we're going to fight you guys. They got along with some of their neighbors, some of the Muslim neighbors, and not with others. But all the Europeans thought were, all the Muslims are the same. I don't know if that is at all like today.
It is easier to think of groups of people as all the same.
You think of them as a monolith.
Yeah.
Well, all those brown people who worship the same God as us but slightly differently, they're all the same. It's not each city is different, each country is... Because some of these are like city-states.
Yeah.
Like they just operate on their own. They don't understand the politics of it, of the religion of it. They don't understand any of it, and they don't think, hey, maybe they're a lot like us, where there's different power plays and cultural groups. They're all the same. Let's go to war. So Louis, not knowing anything about the politics of it, decides, I'm going to go on a crusade. Because that's how Louis talks from now on. That's Louis. Okay. And Elenor says...
Not a very French accent.
No.
Yeah.
I'm going on a crusade.
There we go.
Allons-y, crusade. Allô.
Bye, Louis.
And Elenor says, I'm going too.
Uh-oh.
So Elenor takes up the cross, which women don't do. That's not a thing. So taking the cross is you literally like stitch a cross onto like the shoulder of your cloak or onto the back of the cloak, or like you wear like that. And she's like, I'm going too.
Women don't sew.
No. They probably have to sew it on because the guys just suck at it.
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, this is all you let us do. There, cross. Get out of my sight. Go and die on crusade. Maybe I can get married to somebody I love.
But she's
going with.
All right.
So she gets volunteers to join her. She has ladies in waiting come with. She makes it a whole thing. Like, if we're going on crusade, power couple.
Let's make it a fabulous one.
Well, and also it shows it's supported, and she's very powerful. She has tons of loyal retainers, soldiers. She has an army. And she's like, I'll go too, because they're not going to just go with you, but they'll go with me.
But me and the boys were going to have it was going to be a thing.
Yep. So she goes with. Now Louis sees this as an armed pilgrimage. His goal is to go to Jerusalem. The Pope's goal is actually to take land and protect the kingdoms that have established themselves. There's no reason for an army to go to Jerusalem because they already have it. The Christians own it. They don't need to send an army there.
But we want to do more fighting.
They need to send an army to go attack the fortress of Aleppo, which is like a huge stronghold and the only real threat. and they've been kicking the crud out of all the Crusader states, so they need help. And Louis like, nah, I'll do it my way because I am Louis the Seventh. The skinny, jerky guy.
Oh, he's skinny?
I think he's skinny.
Okay.
I assume he's the skinny guy. Now, Louis marches off to go to war. Yay, Louis! He sucks at war. We've already established he's not good at it. He accidentally massacres his own people. He's not terribly charismatic.
So he'll be perfect for a crusade.
He's perfect for a crusade. There's a German king already out that way, King Conrad. He's kicking butt and taking names until he gets to the Battle of Dorylaeum, which we'll talk about sometime. It does not go well. Now, we'll get into that in just a sec, because while Louis is terrible, Elenor is amazing. She gets to
in comparison, or
like period.
Or just in general?
She gets to Constantinople.
Yeah.
And the emperor there does not want Louis near him. He knows that every time the Crusaders come through, they just cause problems for the Byzantine Empire.
Yep.
They make things worse. Originally, when the whole crusade started, he just wanted like 500 knights, and the Pope sent 20,000 people, and it caused nothing but problems.
They told us it would be good for tourism.
Exactly. And then suddenly all of their trading partners are getting massacred, and cities are on fire. Their own towns are being burned and robbed by supposed Christians and allies, and they're just like, no, we don't want anything to do with this.
How many crusades were there?
I want to say like 14 total. But this is only the second. And it's caused nothing but problems ever since. So...
All right. Just wondering which one was a good one.
Elenor, none. Literally none. None of the crusades were good. None of them. The only one that was maybe okay was a defensive crusade. But that was caused because there were like 10 before it that were super aggressive. And that caused jihads in response. So it's just stupid and bad. Elenor, though, was referred to as Penthesilea. Penthesilea, I think is how it's pronounced. Yeah. She was a legendary queen of the Amazons from like the Trojan War. So she's a Greek legend. They meet her and they're like, who's this warrior queen? She's awesome. We like her. She makes such a good impression on the people that they refer to her as that, and Creiopus. And Creiopus means golden footed. Because she has like gold on the end of her cloak and her robes, and they're just wowed by her. She's smart, and she actually fits really well with Byzantine culture, where women have more rights than their like Western counterparts. Okay. So like, oh, she's great. We love her. She's cool. Why isn't she in charge? She's got a brain. She's passionate. She knows chess. I mean,
did you guys notice she's a woman?
And then they're like, yeah. That was one more reason we like her. Look at her. She's hot, too. Because Elenor is also famed for being gorgeous.
These people just don't understand.
Yes. The French are like, how come you like her more than Louis?
How fancy is it? Are they wearing they got wigs at this time?
No, but I feel like they should.
Oh, it's Louis the 14th.
Louis the 14th. I think it was the guy who really made wigs a big deal. So we got 7 to go.
7 more Louis to get
And there's others between. But yeah, Louis. Again, not a good general. They finally leave Constantinople. The people are actually pretty sad to lose Elenor. Bye, good luck. Kill lots of Muslims, I guess. Woo. Have fun storming the castle. They sail across to the Bosporus, which is where Constantinople ends, and they're now in enemy territory. Technically not. This is still Byzantine land.
Right.
Louis is like, all right, cool, we're going to be doing great. And they're told that King Conrad just fought this awesome battle and he won. Except he didn't. He not only didn't win, it was a one-sided slaughter. Ooh. They got annihilated. So as the French are marching east, the Germans are just kind of walking west, and they look awful. The king, when they actually run into Conrad, and they barely know it's him, because he's sick and staggering, and just kind of like, well, that didn't go well.
How do they think that they won, then?
Because the Byzantines said so. Apparently their messages were either wrong, or they thought, we're going to tell them they won.
Nice.
It's going to be great, because they did not. So Louis is like, oh, well, that sucks.
Yeah.
Moving forward. And the Germans are like, what, didn't you hear? It's fine. We're going.
Those are Germans.
And then he says, we're not going to go to where you guys wanted us to go. I want to go to Jerusalem, because I'm a dork.
Yep.
So they march towards Jerusalem, and as they're marching, the march gets really stretched out. Like, you've got thousands of people, and then the people in the front start moving faster than the people in the back because that's where the baggage is.
Oh, sure.
You should only go as fast as the slowest person in your army. That should be it. And they have a pretty big baggage train, as you do, which is blamed on Elenor because women have so much stuff.
Matching luggage.
Yep. The Royal Highness's matched luggage.
The shoes.
Literally that. The shoes, the industrial strength hairdryer, and I can't live without it. That whole thing, they blame Elenor completely. It has nothing to do with the fact that Louis thinks this is just a pilgrimage, and he brought hundreds of pilgrims with him who are unarmed and have no equipment, and they just stand in the back. And Louis decides to go hang out with them.
Okay.
He takes off his armor, but of course brings his bodyguards. And he stays in the back. Elenor is in the vanguard. And she's on her horse with her uncle, Raymond. And Raymond is like a tough warrior guy. And he's like the grizzled veteran with the scars in the armor. He's like, we're going this way. We're going to kill everybody. And they're supposed to wait on the top of this mountain, and then the baggage train will catch up.
Yeah.
For some reason, Raymond says, I want to go on that mountaintop over there because it's a better camp spot.
Okay.
So this is apparently super duper common at the time. They get to a spot and they're like, oh, no, that's better. And then they go.
Oh, sure.
Usually disobeying the orders of whoever was in charge. Now, Louis, since he ran to the back and dressed as he's wearing like burlap. That was what peasants wore, like a sack. To show how cool he is, but still surrounded by his bodyguards and still gets groomed during the day, that kind of
poser.
A thing. Yeah, he's a poser. He's a hipster pilgrim.
Right.
He's a Hilgrim?
Pilgrim.
Pipster.
Pipster.
I like that. So he has no idea what's going on, and they don't wait to tell him.
Oh.
Meanwhile, they are being watched by their enemies. I forget which Muslim faction it was. But they're sitting out there watching them like, look at these idiots.
Yeah.
Their baggage train separated from their main army. Their main army's stretched out all the way over there. Let's kill them.
Oh.
Now,
let's start this war first.
Let's hit them because we know they're coming to try to kill us, and they have no idea what's going on, and they don't have scouts. They're not doing anything the right way. But we'll stay away from the vanguard because they look
pointy,
hardy.
Yeah.
Like they're all knights.
Yeah.
That's the death pointy end.
Yeah.
If this was a spear, that's the metal part, and then we'll just attack the little wooden part over here.
Sure.
So they charge in and they attack the baggage train.
That's the thing to get.
Louis,
that's all the stuff is,
watches as all his bodyguards are slaughtered.
Ooh.
And is described as bravely being dressed as a peasant, running away and climbing partway up a cliff and hanging on to the root of a tree that God had left there for him to protect him.
Pretty brave.
So he's super brave. Meanwhile, Elenor, with her uncle, fight off the guys so that they don't get completely massacred, but it's a horrible loss. The baggage train is mostly like falls down canyons and is just lost. They lose a lot of the food and supplies, some weapons. And again, totally blamed on Elenor because she brought too many clothes with her, which is nonsense. She also brought a bunch of ladies in waiting who were in the baggage train.
Used plastic straws.
Probably lost a lot of her friends.
Oh.
So this makes her very upset that this was so badly planned and executed. She is blamed, and everyone says, well, she told her uncle to go park on top of that hill because he works for her.
I told him to do that hill, and he did the other hill.
As if she's this person who constantly takes command of things.
Yeah.
But this is super common practice for people to just do what they want to do. This isn't like Eleanor's breaking any kind of decorum or changing things around. They're just blaming her. They get through all of this chaos. It's a really awful loss at Cadmus, the Mount Cadmus. It was not good. Then this is when Louis is like, all right, you know what? We were going to go fight at Aleppo. We're leaving and we're going to go to Jerusalem. And she's like, this is stupid. I want to stay with my uncle and push on to Aleppo, which is the real target, which is the Pope's target. And we're going to fight this battle we're supposed to fight.
Forget about the Pope. Yeah.
And Louis says, nope. And you have to come with, and he forces her to come with him. It's humiliating for Elenor. She's this powerful, strong woman, and all of a sudden, her dorky husband, who ran away and has proven that he's not really good at his job,
ran bravely away.
He's Sir Robin from Monty Python. He's bravely ran away. That's him. He drags her along to Jerusalem to basically go on a tourist excursion, and she's like, "I thought we were here for a crusade." The Germans want us to go this way. The locals want us to go this way. The Pope wants us to go this way. All the military experts say if we go this way, we can win. And he goes, I don't want to go. He goes to Jerusalem, takes most of the army with him, and then he
Still
says,
the guy in charge. Yeah.
now we're going to attack Damascus. Damascus is an ally of the Crusaders. They're a major trade partner. They have a truce going. Everything's fine with them. But he thinks all Muslims are the same side. So he attacks them. The siege is a catastrophe because he has no idea what he's doing. Nobody likes him. And they get their butts kicked when a relieving army shows up. And now Jerusalem looks like a bunch of idiots because they attacked a trade partner, which makes everything worse for the people who live there, because they've been here for generations now, so they're like trying to fit in. But because he just goes and attacks the most powerful trade partner they have, now everybody thinks, oh, these they call them the Franks, the Europeans. These guys are all psycho murderer types.
Yeah. They thought that before, but now
well, after things calm down a little bit, they're like, oh, well, maybe we can work with some of these people. Maybe this is just territory thing. It doesn't have to be a religious thing. Muslims are marrying with Christians, and it's not so bad. But then this stuff keeps happening. Like, you know what? Nah. And then eventually Salah ad-Din shows up, and things go badly for everybody except the Muslims. From then on, basically, the Crusaders just lose everything. This is probably one of the reasons why, because Louis bad at it. Now, Elenor gets two things out of this. She hates Louis because he's weak and not an effective military leader, and he made her look stupid and let everybody blame her for his screw-ups. So that's a huge thing she's learned. During this, she starts talking about a thing called, make sure I get the word right, consanguinity. Consanguinity is the idea that you're too closely related and shouldn't have kids. And that is a legitimate excuse for the church to end a marriage. Now, technically, you should have sorted this out before you get married. Yeah. Louis is like her fourth cousin. Oh. It's like they had a mutual great-great-grandfather or something, which at the time isn't crazy for any family.
Right,
Less people, and it's not like you can travel.
Yeah.
Travel is really hard. The peasants can't travel, and the lords don't want to travel because they own all this nice land. So they're like, okay, we'll mix and match. And it's enough that even by today's standards, that wouldn't be super taboo, and you're not like, progressively losing the chin, and you grow like a third eye, and a bunch of inbred mutants. Yeah. It's a little icky, but not cousins. Yeah. So she's mad. She doesn't want anything to do with this guy. She also learns about how all the trade networks work. She's like getting information and questions, and she's like, so you guys are all on the Mediterranean, and you have so many countries and cultures. How does that work? And she learns basically the precursor to Admiralty law, which is the rules for trade routes and this vessel goes here, and who owns the products, who owns what, and how that all functions. Because even at times of war, trade still happens. Yeah. Even though there are countries trying to kill each other, that doesn't mean the merchants are done or the people don't need food. Things are still happening. And she's fascinated by this. And since the Aquitaine has a huge chunk of coastline, she wants to know how this works. She takes all of this information and she implements it into Aquitanian law in 1160, and then in English law after that. So this is a huge coup for her. This is a huge learning experience. Now, takes that, and she takes her super mad at Louis thing, and they go home. They get separated in their fleets. And
probably on purpose.
And eventually end up in the same place. At which point she talks to the Pope. It's a new Pope. And she says, I hate my husband.
We're probably related.
And I haven't had any sons by him. I want an annulment. And the Pope's response is, well, you two are going to share a bed tonight. I'm going to force you to have sex, and you're going to make this work. Too bad. So he actually leans into the thing she hates the most, which, as we know, makes everybody happy, right? Forcing a woman to bed a guy that she doesn't like. I think there's a word for that. Rape. That's the word. Rape.
But so not if the Pope says it's okay.
Right. So the Pope forces her to have sex. Well, it's her husband. Doesn't matter. If you're not excitedly into the act, like, if you're not like, yeah, let's do this, you're like, oh God, I have to do this. Like, it's a really gross situation.
Sure.
Oh, well, she does conceive a child. Hey. Another daughter. So she's had 2 daughters now with Louis. This seals the deal. She's done. She's like, dude, you can't have male children. It's your fault. which is actually proven to be true. That there's a truth to that. Like the men that's supposed to guide like whether it becomes male or female and everything.
But at this time they couldn't prove
They don't know that. But he's just like, yep.
I mean, the proof is we haven't.
Yep. And then she's like, well, you hate me now because I don't know why, but it's like the whole crusade experience. She's like, I know what I'm doing. Why do you suck so much? And she's been humiliated. She's lost power. She's lost faith in him. She's lost face, which is a big deal. The locals don't like her because they're really conservative and stodgy. So she's like, nothing about our marriage works anymore. I want to be done. Yeah. He finally grants her an annulment. Now, during this time, after they finally get home in like 1149, so it's a 4-year trip that they're off on crusade and come back finally. This sucks. This sucks. It's 4 years of having to deal with somebody you don't like, and at the end of it, they force you to sleep with them. That's terrible. Yeah. And then you have to be pregnant, which is like a 50-50 you might die. So when she gets back, she, at some point, has encountered one of the king's vassals. He is a rising star. He's not just a rising star. He's like terrifying. Oh. Back in England, there is a civil war between King Stephen, who is William the Conqueror's grandson, and I think it's not his sister, but like his cousin, who is Empress Matilda. She claims ownership of England. He claims ownership. Nobody agrees. Her son's name is Henry. Now, Henry is raised to believe that he is going to be the king. He is a Norman, which means that he comes from really tough Viking stock. He comes from the same bloodline as William the Conqueror, and he seems to be kind of a reincarnation of the guy. He's totally fearless, he's terrifying in battle, and he's only like 16. He's been kicking butt since he was 5. He's scary. His brother is a problem. His father can't control him because his father's like, maybe you should calm down. He's like, I appreciate what you're saying, Dad, but I think I got this. And then he goes and puts the boots to somebody and comes back. He's like, you know, the thing you said I probably shouldn't do? I did it and I won. And he winds up controlling all of Normandy and then all these other provinces. And he's 18. Elenor, he's a kid. Well, he's 16 actually while this is going on. 2 years later, Elenor finally gets her annulment granted in 1152. It was specifically the date, 21st of March, 1152. She uses all the reasons of, she has 2 daughters, Mary and Alex. Yeah. She's not happy that we might be related.
The crusade didn't go well.
None of this is good, and it feels like God doesn't want us to be together anymore. So Louis finally relents. Plus, Louis thinks maybe I can get a new bride.
Sure, yeah.
Great.
Upgrade.
We're both young enough. The deal is Louis gets the kids. Elenor gets the Aquitaine.
Oh.
Eleanor's like, yeah.
See ya, kids.
Fine. On the way home, she gets attacked by Geoffrey of Normandy, who is Henry's brother.
Yeah, Geoffrey. So with a G?
Yeah, Geoffrey. G-E-O. It's like Geoffrey is how the spelling kind of goes. And another guy after that. She manages to escape both times. But once she gets back to her home, she's like, this is stupid, and I need a man. And I know the perfect one. And she sends a letter to Geoffrey's brother, Henry, and says, come and claim your prize.
What does she mean?
Her. Oh. She basically writes him a letter and says, now, here's the crazy thing. They must have met. They have to have met because Henry had to go and swear fealty to the king at one point. He had to go to end basically a war because Henry at one point basically declared war on everybody and was winning, but it just at the end, it wouldn't go well. His father finally got him to be like, dude, just okay. You get to keep every single thing you want, but you also get the security that nobody can mess with you anymore because you all swear loyalty to the king. So Henry winds up getting Louis wrapped around his little finger because Henry owns a lot. He has a lot of soldiers and a lot of land, and he can basically defy the king. And then it's thought that he met Elenor and wanted her badly. Oh. And he saw how bad the relationship was. Now, again, Henry's in his teens, and he's got a mind that works this way.
And she's how old?
She's like 12 years his senior or something like that. She's 30 and he's 18. Roughly. Yeah. And so she sends him this letter. You're awesome. Come meet me. And the second you come meet me, we're getting married.
Hugs and kisses.
Yep. Henry gallops like across the country to her home.
Take your horse, Henry.
And they basically elope. They get married in a very small ceremony. It's not grandiose. There's nothing fancy about it. It's described as being a wedding far beneath their station. So part of it seems like it's a very passionate, classic love affair kind of they met, things were on fire. I thought like I picture she's at court with Louis. Henry comes in, the consummate soldier, scary guy. He sticks out in a crowd because he's tall, he's strong, he's fearless, has a swagger to him because he's just been kicking butt. And then he takes the knee, and I like to think it's like he looks up, sees her, she sees him, and they're both like, oh, hello.
Oh.
Hey, how are you? And she's like, ooh, hi. Have you met my husband? He's like, why is everyone so smoldering and looking at each other? Look at the king. Why is everyone looking at these two pretty people? I don't understand.
She looks much better than she did in that tapestry.
Yes. Yeah. So she and Henry elope. Now Henry continues to just be the power player for quite some time, but then 2 years later, the war ends in England and he becomes king. So now Henry owns, by marriage, the Aquitaine, which is the largest, richest chunk of land.
Yeah.
He owns Normandy, Poitou, a few other provinces and chunks of land. He owns like 2/3 of France by himself and all of England.
Wow. So does that count as owning France?
Pretty much. Yeah. He owns and he's a king, but he's still technically Louis's vassal. Ooh. But he owns more than anybody. He becomes the most powerful man in all of Europe with this wedding. He was already really, really powerful. And now Elenor is the queen of what became known as the Angevin Empire. They are so powerful that Henry is sought out to handle disputes between kings. He's able to stand toe to toe with the Pope and tell him to bug off. He's able to do whatever he wants. And Louis looks so weak by comparison, and that's his servant. He's supposed to be his weaker guy.
Yeah.
And Henry basically just kind of goes, oh, of course, Your Highness. I'll totally do that. But he doesn't have to.
Just kidding. I don't speak French. I don't know what he's saying at all.
He doesn't have to do anything. Now, I think Henry spoke English as well. He's born in France, so he speaks French. That's his main language. But he also spoke Latin. He was he was that guy we talked about earlier where is it better to be like the warrior who smashes things, or a lord's kind of, I just know things and I sit over here and everybody does the dirty work.
Yeah.
He does everything. Henry is renowned for his level of energy, where if something needs to get done, he just rides there and does it. It doesn't matter if it's 50 miles away. He's on a horse and he's there. He brings an army with him everywhere he goes, so he can just do things with impunity. But it's a level of control people aren't used to. He's also a huge believer in keeping what are called pipe rolls. They're called that because you roll them up and you stick them in a tube. It looks like pipes. And he kept thousands of these things. It was amazing. I looked for one, and you can find the original pipe rolls. They have the chronicles stored in England. So you can see the original documents. They'll send them to you. They'll send photocopies of them to you, which is so cool. And it lets us see it's all finance stuff. So you can see basically the modern equivalent of a bank record. What did they spend on housing? What did they spend for their servants, for their food, for everything? So we get a huge insight into Eleanor's life from this. Oh, I did leave out one really cool thing because I wanted to mention it. Now, we have the exchequer that the pipe rolls. That's the exchequer is the royal bank.
Yes,
it's their accounting firm, and that's where the pipe rolls are part of. So we have that as proof of what she did, but we don't have any really stuff that she owned, which tells me she wasn't big on owning really important pieces of jewelry or crown jewels or anything like that. But she had one item that her grandfather gave her that was offered up as a marriage gift when she married Louis.
A multi-falcon.
Right here. Ooh. And it is a rock crystal vase chased in gold and jewels. And it's gorgeous. It's at the Louvre today. And it's the only existing thing that we absolutely know was hers. So it's this piece of this great woman's history. So Eleanor's story does not end with marrying Henry and becoming queen. Oh no. Because Elenor...
It's going to have to end pretty soon.
Yep. Well, we're going to breeze through the end because we actually have talked about quite a few things. Now, the stuff with Henry and Louis immediately is they're at loggerheads now because Henry married Louis's ex-wife and she likes him. way more. Then they have 8 children together,
Oh.
including like 6 sons.
Oh, all right.
So Henry's made King of England on the 25th of October, 1154. It is a crazy marriage because Henry is energetic and intelligent and passionate and ambitious, and Elenor is energetic and intelligent and passionate and ambitious.
And the wedding was boring.
And the wedding was boring. So they eventually have like a huge coronation ceremony, and they're very passionately in love, but it's like having 2 fires, and they just burn out. Like
Sure.
they just scorch each other. And while it was messy, they apparently got along long enough to have children because they had William, Henry, Richard, Geoffrey, John, Matilda, Elenor, and Joan. We know who these people are because we talked about them, because we talked about the Devil's Brood.
Yeah.
This is the Devil's Brood. Now, William died at 4. Henry was considered Henry the young king, and he rebelled against his dad. Richard was Eleanor's baby boy. She adored him, and I think that she saw him as the bodyguard. So people have attempted to carry her off like 5 times in her life to just be like, we can marry this woman.
Yeah.
So she's strong, but she knows she needs men in her life to help fight off monsters.
Other men, yeah.
Richard grows up to be 6'1", 6'2" in the Middle Ages, with a mane of like golden red hair and shoulders as broad as like a horse. Like, he's huge. He's this huge, monstrous soldier, and he loves to fight and kill things. So she has her defender. She wouldn't have to be married to anybody as long as she has her loyal son.
Okay.
Because Richard is every bit the soldier his dad was, maybe better. And also, he's one of those guys who rides out, leads his troops, and they're like psychic, like they're obsessed with their loyalty to him. So she starts to want to be independent again. And after Henry the younger dies,
Yeah.
all the scheming comes out about who gets to take over for Henry II after he dies. And all the sons want a piece of the empire. Henry waffles about who gets to run what, and he lets John run one piece, and Richard, and he tries to play the boys off against each other. Meanwhile, marrying his daughters off to kings, so they all become queens, and he expands his power base hugely. But Richard is a really, really, really good and relentless soldier, and eventually Henry, getting into his 50s, starts to weaken and be overrun by this, and it stresses him out, and he eventually dies.
Oh.
There's a story that when Richard's dad died, they had a moment of like forgiveness, but when he looked over the corpse, it wept.
The corpse wept?
The corpse cried when Richard came in. Now, that's obviously mythological story, but the idea being behind it, he stressed his dad out and hurt his dad's heart so much that he just died. It just killed him that his boy went against him. So now Elenor gets the Aquitaine. But during her time with Henry, because she had intrigued and gotten her sons to rebel, she spent 16 years in prison.
Oh.
She was under house arrest from 1173 to 1184 because Henry couldn't trust her, because she kept scheming to get her lands back and be independent, because she had her son, the bodyguard, to kill for her. And she kept motivating him to fight her against dad. Now, we don't know exactly how bad their relationship was, but it was bad enough that we have it on the pipe rolls that she was put in this space and she was kept there under guard. And the first thing Richard did when he became king was he sent William Marshal, who's considered one of the greatest knights of history and ruled under 4 kings and is going to get his own episode because he's pretty darn cool, and was played by William Hurt in a movie, which is neat. I love William Hurt. Richard sends him to free her from prison. She outlives Richard. She's the queen mother into John's reign. When Richard went on crusade in the Third Crusade during the Robin Hood times, she ran England for him, not John. So that's a common misconception about him.
Yeah.
He trusted his mother, who was awesome. She lived to be 80 years old.
Wow.
She outlived all of her children
Yikes.
and her ex-husbands, except for her son John and her daughter Elenor, which that I don't wish on anybody. Another great thing that I thought was amazing that she did was Henry II, her husband, was a total cheat, a total lech. If he met a pretty girl, he had to be with her. He had
What's
several.
the point of being king if you can't do that?
It's good to be the king. And he had bastard children. One of them was Geoffrey of York, And Elenor raised the kid as her own, and she loved him, and she took care of him, and she never batted an eye. So we have a spitfire, a passionate, intelligent woman, a crusader, the most powerful woman in Europe, all of these things, and then also like a mother to 10 kids, and plus all the bastards that she took in and took care of, power broker, one of the most amazing women in history, and we have so little about her in like artifacts and actual stuff. We don't have a lot of pictures of her, but we have the one cool item of hers, and then we have all of the impact that she made. And everybody blames her for every bad thing that ever happened because she was the strongest woman of her time.
It sounds to me that she didn't do, though, as many like decisive things. She was present for and a figure in these decisive things, but she herself wasn't like...
Yeah, she's I get this...
She's like the catalyst versus...
Yes, I get this huge vibe of she's the power behind the throne a lot of the time. And she's the only woman who could hang with all of these power guys. Like, so many women just get ignored throughout history. And the whole thing about, like, what is it, like, women behaving badly are the only ones who get recognized kind of thing, because she stuck out, because she was capable. And a big part of it was her father took really good care to make sure she was not, he didn't make her, but he fostered all of these things with her. He allowed her to be herself and to grow and to become this strong woman. And it wasn't like some kind of misandrous type thing where I don't need no man or anything like that. But she was a very intelligent woman of the time who knew exactly what she was capable of doing. She worked within the system brilliantly and wonderfully. And really all she wanted at the end of the day was for her kids to be taken care of and to have what was hers. But she gets blamed for all the bad things and none of the good things. And it's this really complex, interesting character. And I love her. I think she's just amazing. And I just love that she lives to be 80 years old in the Middle Ages, where like the life expectancy is 30. And she just keeps on trucking. And she meets this young, handsome guy, and she's just like, mine. She's just great. I think she's wonderful. So that's Elenor of Aquitaine.
Elenor of Aquitaine.
Just being amazing.
Well, there we go. Well, thanks, Will. We're out of time.
We're out of time.
All right. That was exciting and amazing. We learned a little bit more about France and English history.
I think it was a good comeback episode. Talk about just a really cool person. We don't talk about enough cool ladies of the Middle Ages. There's not enough about them. Yeah. You get her, get the Lioness of Brittany. She was great.
And that's it.
That's it. I'll find more. I'll find Joan of Arc. That didn't end well.
Speaking of women in history, next week we'll be joined. Yes, we'll be joined.
Next we'll be joined by Erica.
Erica Larson will be
Is this her third episode
history
or
teller?
Fourth?
Yeah. So if you're a fan of Erica, she'll be back
She'll
here
be
next
back.
week.
We always like having her.
We were discussing the Great Schism.
Not telling anybody about that.
Which happened about 100 years before this thing.
Yep. So it is already happening. Because the Great Schism is still going on.
True.
It never stopped. Oh. It didn't stop. There's no end to it.
Well, history keeps happening.
Yeah, it does. It does. Keeps on rolling.
All right. As always, like and subscribe, spread it around, tell
Share
people.
With friends.
If you have any comments or corrections, please put them in the comments.
Yes. And also, if you have ideas for upcoming events, let us know. We look at those. We like doing that. I think that's really cool that people give us feedback.
There we go.
Sorry we're gone for so long. We'll hopefully not do it again. We miss you.
I don't miss you. It's good to have you back, though.
Yeah, I miss you, Mike.
Oh.
I missed us.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.